Welcome, everyone, tonight to our work session for our Bountiful City Council. And we will turn the time over to our attorney, Clint Drake.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry to be the one that has to always do this, but we are required by law to do it every year, so here we are. This is our Utah Open and Public Meetings Act training. So I'm just going to go through these slides. Many of you, most of you have been through it before, and so just bear with me as we go through it. Questions, comments are welcome. Next slide, please. So the one thing we want to do is we want to focus on, whenever we do anything as a public body, or whenever you do anything as a public body, you want to keep in mind the legislative intent of the act. Why is it that we do what we do? It is to aid in the conduct of the people's business, and we want to just pay attention to those bullet points A and B, and that is that it's important that city councils take their actions openly and conduct their deliberations openly. So everything that we do revolves around those two basic principles. Open communication. So we'll go ahead and next slide. So what is a meeting? A meeting means the convening of a public body or a specified body with a quorum present, including a workshop or executive session, whether in person or by means of electronic communications, or for the purpose of discussing, receiving comments from the public about, or acting upon a matter which the public body or specific body has jurisdiction or advisory power. So we have a few of those bodies in our city, namely the big three that we deal with the most is, of course, you as the city council. The other one would be the planning commission. The other one would be the power commission. So those require quorums to conduct business, and those require, there are certain noticing requirements that we'll talk about later. Next slide, please. What is not a meeting? A chance gathering is not a meeting. And a social meeting is not a meeting. So chance gathering is just you run into each other at the store, you're at a high school football game and you happen to run into each other, things of that nature. The law contemplates that they expect you to have a social life and a personal life, and those things could certainly happen. You can leave it on that slide, but just as I back up, just a reminder of I can't remember if it's further in my slides or not, so I'll go over it now, and that is the quorum. It's not a meeting if it's not a quorum. You need 3 council members to make a quorum, and also, so 2 of you is not a meeting, 3 of you is. The mayor and 2 of you is not a meeting. So that, just in case that, I think it's ahead, but just in case. Also the social meeting, Christmas parties, a summer barbecue, things of that nature are not covered by this. That is not a meeting. Next slide. So we had this come up with the Planning Commission just last week, and we've talked a little bit about this in the past. When I made this, it was like this slide that we just talked about and no one ever really thought about it. Now it's like we're all experts on it. Can a meeting be held without people in the same room? Yes, that can. There are certain things that still need to happen. We can have electronic meetings. The first one is that the public notice requirements still apply. All of our noticing is the exact same, whether it's electronic or not. The public must have a means to attend, and electronically attending member must be able to communicate verbally or electronically so that each member of the public body is able to hear or observe the communication, and it must be adopted into existing rules or by resolution or ordinance. And so the way that we have done it is that, so currently you have not authorized electronic meetings. During the major COVID months in the past couple of years, we just adopted resolutions that had expiration dates on them that allowed for the blanket use of electronic meetings for public bodies during those times. Those have expired. So the way that we do it now is if there were ever another need, such as COVID-19, let's hope there's not, we would just pass a resolution or an ordinance, and there have been circumstances in the past where we just passed a resolution. You passed a resolution at the beginning of a meeting to allow one member to attend electronically for that meeting. Next slide, please. Closed meetings. The Utah Code does allow for public meetings to be closed for limited reasons. Just a reminder, all meetings start and actually end as open meetings. So that is that. And I'm going to take this opportunity, before we advance this slide, I am going to take this opportunity to put somebody on the spot. As you all know, to go into a closed meeting, we have a roll call vote, and I had this really sophisticated random name generator, and I used to keep it on just over there in the corner, and somebody stole it. My little pieces of paper are stolen. I came in here one day over Christmas, and there is a random name generator that is here. I want to know if anybody in this room wants to confess or claim that this was their idea. I love it, by the way. Whoever did it, I love it. It was you? It was you? It's awesome. So, we now, today, will have the opportunity to randomly generate through these 5 awesome balls, which, yes, your names are written on there. So, okay, awesome, Miranda, good job. I didn't know it was you.
Miranda needs a distinguished service bonus. Yes.
So I thought it was Gary first. Then I thought it was Lloyd. Then I thought it was Richard.
I like the paper.
And I was just going to go down from there. So, yes, I did like the paper, but this is just awesome. So, yeah, I mean, you've got the name right there. There's Millie's last name right there. So,
I just want to thank Miranda for bringing joy to the open public meetings.
yeah.
Anybody who can do that.
Yes.
You know how long I've been waiting to bring this thing out? It's been a month. It's been more than a month. So she's probably wondering what the heck happened to that thing. So anyway. I don't like it. I love it. Okay. Next slide. So, as you know, and just a reminder, the reasons for the closed meeting, individuals, character.
I'm so sorry. Before we move on, I just wanted to make sure I understood. So the last thing where we were talking about if someone were absent, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. If one of us were going to be absent and we wanted that person to be able to participate electronically, we could pass a resolution in the same meeting?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we just start at the first item we'd put on the agenda is that resolution, and then that just allows them to do that.
Thank you.
Yep. That would also, and since we're talking about closed meetings too, that would apply. For example, if that meeting had a closed session, that would also apply. They could attend the closed portion as well.
I'm sure just for logistics, it would be helpful if we knew and it, had
In advance. Yep.
some time to prepare. Thank you.
And that's generally not a huge problem. I think there's once or twice where it's happened where it was a really critical issue, or we didn't have enough for a quorum, but we could do it that way. So those are some of the reasons why it might happen.
You said all closed meetings open and close as an open meeting?
Yes. Yep. You cannot just go straight into a closed meeting. You have to have a meeting like this before you can go into a closed meeting. It doesn't have to be in this room. Say, for example, we convened a meeting that was just a closed meeting. You would still have to advertise the open meeting, have the one agenda item that was the closed meeting, still have the open meeting, and then immediately have the roll call vote that would allow to go into the meeting. If the vote was in the affirmative, then you go into the closed meeting. You have the meeting. You go out of the closed session, and then you close the open meeting. And again, it doesn't have to happen in this room. It could happen in our workroom. It could happen in any room. It could happen, if we needed to at the fire station like we were doing before. We just have to publicly notice it. Any other questions or comments? So the reasons are to discuss an individual's character, professional competence, or physical or mental health. That one obviously is a sensitive issue that you may not want to broadcast to the public over a YouTube channel or to have 50 people in the room. So that is one of the reasons that you can have the closed session. It is also the only item that you can do where it's not recorded. So all of this still has to be recorded. So as you know, whenever we go into a closed session, we still record the meetings, and that's required by law. That is the only one that is not required, again, due to the sensitive nature of what might be discussed in a meeting that discusses character, professional competence, or physical or mental health. But in order to do that, the mayor has to sign a declaration that says all we talked about was the character or competency of an individual, nothing else. So you could have a closed session that had both, and you could take out that part, and we would just clarify that in the declaration that, yes, the portion of the meeting that was about the character or competency of an individual was not recorded. The rest of the closed session was recorded. Other one would be to discuss security personnel, devices, or systems. Obviously, for example, in this building, if we wanted to talk about beefing up our security systems or tweaking our security systems, we don't necessarily want to broadcast that to the world about where our security systems are. Investigative proceedings involving misconduct, pretty common sense there. And then strategy sessions for the exchange, lease, or sale of real property. That one, of course, if we were going to, say, for example, buy a piece of property, it may not be the best strategy to sit in an open meeting and talk about how much we are willing to pay for a piece of property. The caveat on that one is all sales, and actually any votes that are taken have to be done in the public. But public notice, there are specific public noticing requirements for the purchase or sale of real property. So that would still be required. So for example, if you go into a closed session to discuss the purchase of property that was on the open market and it was for sale and you decided you wanted to buy it up to a certain amount and you give staff authorization, we go out and talk to the property owner, have that discussion. If there is an agreement, then we bring that agreement back and it's approved in an open meeting.
Question.
Yeah.
So even though it's closed and it's being recorded, is it subject to grammar laws? I mean, how, a grammar request or?
So hold on that one. There's some slides in the future. If it doesn't get answered at the end, we'll come back to it. But I think we'll probably get to your answer here in a few slides. Okay, next one. So the other thing is are there any meetings that must be closed? Nope, absolutely not. It's always at your discretion. So any of those reasons, you don't have to hold a closed session. You could do it in an open meeting, but most of the time that's probably not a good policy. Next slide. So process, and we're going to do this tonight. So good reminder, refresher, quorum must be present. 2/3 of the body must vote to close the meeting. Hold the open meeting, which we're in the work session now, but we'll have the open meeting. And then there's the roll call vote, the location, and the reasons for holding the closed meeting. Not the specifics, just is it for the sale and lease of real property? Is it for the character and competency of an individual? Something like that. Okay, next one. So what is prohibited? You may not approve anything, basically anything in a closed meeting, certainly not an ordinance, a resolution, a rule, a regulation, a contract, or an appointment. That doesn't mean that those things can't be discussed. If they fall into those categories, then they certainly can be discussed, but they must be done in the open. If we refer back to the original slide about the purposes of the act, it's for the city council to do the public's business in the public. You can't interview or discuss a person to fill an elected position, and you can't take any final action, which is what we just discussed. Next one, please. So just a quick overview of the noticing requirements. Certain things have different noticing requirements, but in general, we have to provide written notice of the place where the meeting will be held. That's at least one local general circulation newspaper or media correspondent. It's also the Utah Public Notice website. That one's getting more and more used and more relevant. And then at least 24 hours before the meeting, post the agenda, the date, the time, and the place. We also do more than that. We post it on our social media websites, posted here within the city hall, and so we put it in a few other places as well. Next one. Emergency meetings, the law does allow for emergency meetings. It's got to be an actual emergency, and you still have to give notice, but it's just the best notice that's practicable at the time. And then the minutes must include a statement of the unforeseen circumstances that made the meeting necessary. The most recent one, and one of the few that I've ever had in my career, is when we had the fire. I think we had a meeting when we had the fire, and I think we might have had one as well when we had the windstorm a few years ago as well. In those situations, we obviously couldn't put it on in a general circulation newspaper, so we put it on our social media, or we put it on, and we put it out to the Utah Public Notice website, because that's what we could do. If the power were out, or if the internet were down, then it might be something like posting it on our front door of our city hall. The best means that we have, depending on what the emergency is. Okay, next one. Written minutes and recordings must be kept. Next one. These are open, so these are open meetings and they are public records. I'm going to hold off on the closed session one because I think we're still going to address it later. Keep going. So here's the requirements of the minutes. They must include the date, the time, and the place of the meeting, the names of the members that were present and absent, the substance of all matters proposed, discussed, or decided, names and substance of information from individuals giving testimony or comments, individual votes on each matter, and any additional information requested by a member. So that's our minute requirements. Next one. So pending minutes must be made available to the public within 30 days after holding the open meeting. And they just have to indicate that they are not approved or that they're a draft and subject to change. Next one. So what if there is a violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act? So keyword there that I have underlined in Utah Code 52-4-305 is that there has to be intent. You have to intentionally violate the law. And if you do intentionally violate the law, then it is a Class B misdemeanor, which is a crime. There's also talking about how things are remedied. Under 301, a court can void any action in violation of the law. Sometimes a violation can be cured by discussing and taking a public vote in a subsequent meeting. That's probably the most common way. And they may have to pay court costs and attorney fees. So now's probably a good time to talk about the closed session. So if somebody were to seek records for a closed session meeting through a grandma request, we would deny it. We would say it would say yes, it's a public record, but it falls under one of these categories of protections, which is why we're not going to release it. If they wished to pursue that, they could seek to have those records released through the district court. The way that would work is, thankfully I've never had to do this in my career, but the way that it would have to work is it would be, you'd go through the regular court proceedings, and ultimately it would be a judge that would listen to the recordings and in private, not in court, but in private, and determine whether or not it fell within those exceptions and whether or not it was a proper closed meeting. If the judge agreed, then those records would not be released. If a judge agreed or disagreed, then they might be released in whole or in part, depending on what the judge might determine. So our knee-jerk response would be, if it's a closed session, we wouldn't hold a closed session if we didn't think it qualified for that. So therefore, we would not allow that to be released. It's also a good reminder that it's not just the city council or staff that might be in a closed session. There may be a reason why you invite somebody else to be in a closed session, to provide, an expert to provide information, a contractor that might have information regarding a security system. There's many reasons why you might do that. But it is important to note that you not discuss those things about the closed session with people that weren't in the closed session, at least until things are made public. For example, on the purchase of real property, you might have a discussion and say, we want to buy this plot of ground and we're willing to pay $100 for it, and we negotiate it, they agree, we're going to pay $100 for it. Then, of course, we're going to discuss it out in the open because we got to get the agreement approved and so on and so forth. But just use discretion when discussing those things that are not part of the closed session. Next slide. So, just building on what we just talked about, who can enforce the Open and Public Meetings Act? The courts, the Attorney General can, the county attorney can, and then what the situation we just talked about was the private citizen who is an aggrieved party. That would be the ways that you can do it. The courts would never do it on their own volition. It would have to be something they were petitioned to do. Next slide. Oh, no problem. So they only have 90 days to pursue corrective action, 30 days if it involves bonds or notes or debt. That's because we can't be, as cities, we can't be held hostage by court proceedings on things that need to proceed. So if something happened involving, say, for example, a bond, and somebody came back 6 months later, we're way too far down the path. We've expended way too many resources to do that, to undo something like that. But in general, the most common thing would be, oh yeah, we missed this or we didn't notice this correctly. We need to go back and do this in an open and public meeting, on the next meeting or something like that. So that concludes, I believe. Is that our last slide? So there's other stuff that's not Open and Public Meetings Act, but yeah, I think that might be our last slide on Open and Public Meetings Act.
Is that,
Oh, yeah.
oh, sorry. Is that 90 days from the meeting?
Yes.
From when the meeting was held,
Yeah,
correct?
yes.
Okay.
Yep. So just a reminder of my favorite quote involving Open and Public Meetings Act and just the business that we do in general. Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
One follow-up.
Yeah.
So, is there a time limitation for the closed meeting? Is, like 5 years, then their grandma will?
So the closed meeting would be 90 days. Some certain records are forever. Somebody might.
So it's a legitimate closed meeting. We have that somebody's petitioning it, so it's forever.
There's not really a record of a closed meeting other than the recording.
Yeah.
We don't make minutes, and so there's not really anything that could be requested because we don't really create any record for that. But let's say, for example, again, just using the sale or lease of property or purchase or sale of property. There wouldn't be a record of the meeting itself other than the recorded minutes, but assuming that there was, direction to move forward with the purchase or sale of property, there would be an agreement, and they certainly could request that, and they could get that. But in that situation, it wouldn't really make sense because we put all of our agreements in the packets, and it's discussed in the open, and so it really wouldn't. They certainly could request it, but if somebody requested it later on, let's say 2 years after the fact, Shauna would just say, yeah, that's in our packet. It's online. It's right here. There's no need to fill out a request. Here it is, and here's how to find it. Any other questions? Okay, just a little bit on ethics. Next slide. How much time do you need?
20 minutes.
Okay, we can definitely get through this, and I was hoping he said he needed
25, 27.
There you go. There we go. Okay. Just a reminder, I had a discussion with our 2 new council members about this, and we talked about this quite a bit. The rest of you have had this before, so we'll just go through it quickly. Just a reminder of the Municipal Officer and Employees Act. The purpose of that is to just establish standards of conduct for municipal officers and employees that require disclosure of actual or potential conflicts. Go ahead and advance the slide. You can go through that, go past that one. So it does 2 things. It sets up a disclosure system for conflicts of interest and describes crimes that can only be committed by public officers or employees. Next one. The criminal acts are basically this. You can't use your position to benefit yourself or others. Unless, of course, you're talking about the citizens of Bountiful in general. Everything you do is for the benefit of the citizens of Bountiful in general, but no direct financial benefits to people and certainly to yourself and family members. And that's, as I said there, it basically focuses on economics and special privileges. Next slide. So it is a crime to disclose or improperly use private, controlled, or protected information that was acquired by way of an official position. So,
Like Congress.
yes, yeah. I'm gonna stay silent on that. Other than, okay, and yeah, we'll. Example of this would be there are discussions about that you are privy to as the council that are about a new and exciting business that might come to town that or organization that might come to town that could build a structure or move in and immediately increase property values surrounding the parcel that they're looking at. And so you go out and decide that it would be a good idea to purchase the property surrounding that or to purchase the actual property. Those would be bad things. You should not use or attempt to use an official position to further substantially a personal economic interest or special privileges for oneself or others. That's the old, well, do you know who I am? Try to avoid that. To knowingly receive, accept, take, or seek a gift, an economic benefit that would tend to improperly influence a person carrying out their official duties. Just an FYI, I think you all know this, there's basically a law that says that municipal employees should not accept gifts of anything that's, they should just be nominal gifts that you can accept, and it should never be for anything that's valued more than $50. And you should not receive compensation for assisting another person or entity in a transaction without making written disclosure to the mayor and to the public. Next slide. Cannot use your benefit yourself. I think we already did that one. That was a duplicate. Okay, go ahead. I need to take that one out. So how do you disclose? You are required to disclose if you have an interest in any business or entity that does business with the city or that is regulated by the city. Easiest way to do that is just to do it on the, am I hearing kids crying?
Yeah.
There is a human crying, I think, right out.
Just out back? Okay.
Yeah. Do you think we
Yeah, just check, make sure they're okay. It's dark outside and could be scary. There's a parent there. We've all been there. Okay. So yeah, just doing business with the city, or if you're regulated by the city, you need to disclose. We have a disclosure form that Shauna has, and you must disclose any personal interest that conflicts with your public duties. Next slide.
Before you leave,
Yeah.
will you give an example of a business that's regulated by the city?
So something that is regulated by the city doesn't need to be. So, for example, if you owned a business within the city and you were seeking sign approval for a sign, we regulate how big your sign can be, what type of sign you would use. We don't necessarily regulate the type of business whether it's pet grooming or framing or baking. We don't really deal with that. Dental offices, we don't really deal with that. But say, for example, you came in and you had a sign. You would want to disclose, hey, this is my business. If there was something that you were voting on with the sign, hey, this is my business, and just disclose that. One key thing that's important to note that I don't think is discussed enough, and that is this: you're required to disclose. You're not required to recuse. That's a decision that you have to make yourself. There are multiple reasons why. This is my slide right there. If you want to, you can go ahead. Yeah, you were perfect. You were right. It was like we were in sync. So go down to the not required to recuse. You've just got to decide, and there's basically, I broke it down to these two bullet points. How will it be viewed by the public, and does it build the community? So there may be a reason why you don't have to recuse, but maybe it's a good idea just for the optics of it to recuse. That would be a good reason. Back to the top, how do you disclose? There's requirements. You have the written disclosure that you make that you give to the Shauna that anybody that requests it, we can provide to the public. There's also the verbal disclosures. I once worked with, it wasn't a council member, it was a commissioner somewhere that had a really bad habit of sitting through the entire agenda item, discussing it, being fully engrossed in the discussion, offering opinions, and then when it came to the vote, that person would say, oh, I have to abstain. Not at the beginning of the vote, like when it got to them. During the vote, they would say abstain. That's not the best way to do it. The best way to do it would be, if you've got a conflict where you're going to abstain from voting or you're going to recuse yourself, then you should make it known ahead of time. You should not take part in the discussions. That's for your protection. It's not required, but my advice is always to do this, is if you're going to recuse, if you don't want to be part of that process, then make it known right at the beginning of the agenda item, and then leave the room. We'll come get you when it's done. And that way you can't be accused of still trying to influence or your presence influencing the body. So that would be my suggestion. You just head out into the lobby or out in the hall here, and we can come get you when it's over. You also have to remember, obviously you're all Bountiful residents, and to a certain degree, every decision you make impacts you as well as it does every other citizen. You might live in a zone where something might get rezoned. Those things are common, it happens. If you ever have any questions about there's an issue, whether or not you feel like there needs to be a disclosure, shoot me an email, give me a call. I'm happy to discuss it with you. Next slide. That's it. So, boom, 5 or 6 minutes right there. Any final questions? Oh, I was going to say one thing. The mayor did ask me, I didn't follow up with you, Mayor, so I hope this is okay. She had asked, we went through, just a reminder, we have our rules of order and procedure. And it's probably been about 10 years now, 10, 12 years ago, the legislature came out and said, we're not going to tell you what the rules are, but you've got to have rules. And so we've got these rules that we've adopted, and a lot of it is just the state law, and some of it talks about, some of these things are things that a prior council adopted that talk about things like, the open public comment and discussion and agenda items and courtesy and things like that. The only thing that we wanted that the mayor thought would be important, just so that we're all on the same page, is just how do we deal with if there's a motion on the table and then somebody makes a substitute motion, or how do we deal with that? In general, the way it's done at the league is that second substitute motion is the one that is considered, but we just thought it would be a good opportunity for you to discuss and make sure that we're all on the same page on how that should proceed. Is that okay to?
Yeah, I'd love your input on that. That way, if that happens in a meeting, then we're all on the same page and we're not confused or caught off guard.
Right.
So.
And I think the way that we've done it in the past is the substitute is the one that we focus on.
So can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So if, for instance, I were to make a motion,
Yes.
before it's seconded, Councilman Bell makes a substitute motion, that is the question you're asking about?
Yes.
Okay.
But there's also the question of if there is a second and how you want to deal with that. So I should back up and say this too. And if this requires more discussion, we can have it at another time. But sometimes I think a lot of the public and even city councils make the mistake that, we're somehow bound by the Robert's Rules of Order or some sort of rules of order. We're not. It's whatever you decide those rules are. We kind of follow a loose format that is similar to a Robert's Rules of Order, but not so formal that it's awkward or off-putting.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that situation where Kate makes a motion and then Jesse makes another motion, alternate, is that what we're calling it?
Substitute, yeah.
Substitute, okay, substitute motion. Then what if other people different, so Millie says, well, I want to second Kate's and I want to second Jesse's. If there is a diverging.
So that's why the mayor wanted to talk about this, just so that we were all on the same page. I think in general, the way we have done it is, it's usually, if somebody makes a motion, we wait to see if there's a second. And we've had a couple of substitutes in the past, but I think that's always been after a second. And usually even after some discussion. So you just have to decide what you think is best, how you would like to. I'm happy to give my opinion if you'd like it. Otherwise, you're free to make that whatever you want it to be.
I'd like your opinion.
Okay. So on I think I think just general courtesy and decorum, it would be nice if a motion is made to just wait and whether or not there's a second. You can still make a substitute motion, but there may not be a need for it, because if you make the first motion and there's no second, then it just dies anyway. And then you could still make your motion. If there is a second, then you can always offer up a substitute right after, or a little bit further down the line. But I would just say as a general, just kind of general order and decorum and courtesy, that if somebody makes a motion, then we should wait to see if there's a second.
So could we just, so then would that just be the mayor just simply asking, do I have a second?
Yep. Well, and a lot, I mean, you guys do it so often, a lot of times the mayor doesn't even have to say that. It's just
Sure.
somebody says a second. Yeah.
But just to kind of close the loop?
Yep.
So if we were operating that way, then we would always deal with the original motion.
At least to the point of whether or not there was a second.
Yes. And then if there was a second and somebody offered a substitute, then what would we,
So there would have to be a second to the substitute, and if there was a second, then you would
we would
discuss it.
deal with the substitute?
So just going down the line, if you think about it, the logistics of it, so let's say Kate makes a motion and Jesse seconds it, you're running out of people that can continue to do things. So and then Cecily says, I want to make a substitute, and Millie says, I would second that. I mean, it's really just down to Millie and Richard if they wanted to second it or not. So you're.
And then if they did, then we would deal with that substitute motion.
Yes.
And then would we go back to the original?
Depends on what you did with it.
Right.
You would ultimately have a vote on it, and just remember, under that same scenario, if our two first voters down there, they presumably may not want to vote with the substitute, which means that you would need to get you would need the rest of the council to have an affirmative vote.
And I assume in that case, I could withdraw my second or withdraw my
Yep.
motion.
Yep, and you
I
can.
liked the number 2 better.
Or just have the discussion about it and jump in on the discussion. Don't need to withdraw yours because it's the one that's focused on, and then vote on it, yay or nay. So you don't necessarily have to withdraw, you just have to vote on it.
So in this scenario, would we want to establish some kind of a, protocol where it would be first in time, would be first in vote to be voted on? Or like, Kate's motion that is seconded by Jesse, my alternate or substitute motion, but because they were first in time
So no, if there's a substitute, the first one doesn't get voted on. Yep, it's the substitute is the new one.
And that's what we're establishing now, is we're
Got
just,
If it fails, then we go back to the first.
so is that clear to everyone?
All right, so it's the substitute, there's vote.
We would deal with
Then
that motion.
If it fails, we bop back.
Yep, you go back. If it doesn't fail, then it's done.
Second.
You vote and you're done. So we good on that? Everybody clear? Everybody agree?
Everyone in agreement?
We can talk about it more if you'd like, just probably not tonight. Kate, you look like you might want to talk about it more.
I spend so much time at the Capitol under a more strict system. it's
Right,
fine.
it's a lot more strict.
Too loosey-goosey.
Okay,
I think our system has worked well with the collegiality of the six
yeah.
people up here.
Well,
so.
yeah, we have a great council, and I think that's really the gist of it is that I don't anticipate any issues. The mayor and I were just talking about a lot of different scenarios, just so that we were prepared with if something came up, so, yep.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we're good. That's your time. So I assume that, like in the past, you'll be giving us a certificate saying that we completed this training?
Yep, Sean, I'll get that to you.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, we'll move on. Mr. Hill with our BDAC mural recommendations.
Thanks. Rebecca would have done this, but she's not here tonight. We decided to bring this to you rather than wait 2 more weeks. But this is the results of the RFP that BDAC did for the mural on their building. And I apologize, I intended to show it on the overhead projector, but the PDF is protected and I can't open it, so I'm sorry. But you have it in your staff report. There were 3 murals that were submitted for consideration, and the mural that was recommended by the BDAC and then subsequently was also recommended by the Public Art Advisory Board is Hank Matson's proposal. This is the first one listed that is called Utah Landscapes. And I'll just read briefly what the Public Art Advisory Board said. They felt it was the strongest for its concept, style, and subject matter. One member summed up the discussion with, "It has a sophisticated use of color and would elevate the location." All members present felt the style of the work seems refined and timeless. Although the advisory board felt all 3 proposals presented good ideas, Hank Matson's proposal showed, in their opinion, both artistic merit and carries the recommendation of the BDAC, with their experience seeing his dependable quality work. So with that, we would like the city council to select a mural with the recommendation that has
So the
come forward from the 2
recommendation
bodies.
was from the BDAC and also the board,
Thank you.
the art commission, right?
Yeah, both groups independently selected this one.
There was just the 3 submittals.
Correct.
Well, there were more submittals, but these were the 3 that they chose as their top 3. And the landscape one was the one that they both chose as their top choice.
That's right, I apologize. These were the top 3, right?
I concur with the selection from our recommending entities. I agreed that it was my favorite of the 3.
I do as well. It was my favorite as well.
I liked Flying Bird and Sunrise, but I'm no artist. And I'm happy to live with their recommendation.
Okay,
I liked option 1 as well.
They're
Okay.
all very, very good in their own way.
sounds like we have direction for them.
Okay, I think that both boards felt the same way, that they felt like all 3 had qualities that were really good, and but it sounds like the consensus is to go with their recommendation, and so we will move ahead. We'll let them know, and that'll get started. So that's very fun.
Great.
What's the timeline to have it installed, do you know?
I'm afraid I don't know that. I'm sure Rebecca would have. We're going to need to wait till the weather is appropriate, but I don't know what appropriate is in that case, so.
Thank you. We'll find out. We'll get back. We'll get that answer.
Little question, does anybody know what the building in panel 3 is? Is it meant to be the Capitol, or
Looks like the Capitol, to be honest.
just wondering?
Kind of Thomas Hart Benton-esque is the
Any other discussion on this? Okay, we can move to the legislative update. Thanks.
All right. Well, we probably will tag team this. We had Legislative Policy Committee meeting yesterday, and the 4 of us that participate in that, we're all there. And of course, Kate's spent a lot of time on the Hill. Let me give, if I can, a quick update on Ray Ward's HB 95. This is the regulation against requiring grass. So the bill, as originally proposed, would have prohibited cities, counties, HOAs, mobile home parks from requiring their residents from installing grass or sod, and would have also prohibited cities or those agencies from enforcing that or any ordinance around that. I thought that Ray and I had an understanding after the conversation that he and I had and that the mayor and Kate had at local officials day about what would be acceptable, but and presented that to the LPC, but I guess we spoke past each other. And what I thought he was comfortable with was amending his bill to say that cities may not require only grass, that we couldn't say you can only have grass, and that cities therefore had to also provide another option. His intention, so he redrafted the bill after we gave him language that had been reviewed by city staff and league staff. He amended that language that we gave him to say that cities still may not require grass anywhere on someone's property in any proportion or amount. So we cannot require, no city, HOA, county can require a property owner to install grass or turf on their property under a substitute bill. He did take out the provision that we can't enforce our existing ordinances. So if somebody had grass and they weren't maintaining it, we could still require them to maintain their property, but we still couldn't force them to maintain grass. They could comply with the rest of our ordinance, which simply says that their property has to be landscaped. And we have some standards for landscaping. I think it's 50% of the landscapable area has to have irrigated plants on it, trees or shrubs. So with his substitute bill, it doesn't affect Bountiful City's ordinance, but it is not what we represented to the league that or the agreement that we thought we had. I spent some time with him on the phone yesterday, and he'd like us, the league, to find out what other cities are doing and if the majority of cities' ordinances are like ours or not. The early results are that, many cities are like us. They don't require grass. They have alternative options. But we're going to find out from the others and see. So we'll see where we go. But, it's a little concerning still. It is just sort of a one-size-fits-all approach to land use that the state dictates, which is concerning. And what I don't know, or if I don't know if he realizes, and I need to have the conversation with him, is that although many of us don't require grass, nearly all of us require some sort of greenery that would require irrigation anyway. And if his intention is to do away with the requirement to irrigate your property, then if that's the next step, then that's probably a lot more concerning to all of us. So any comments, feedback on that? The direction right now from the league would be, and I'm kind of helping the league on this bill, is to try and work with him to get him to allow some flexibility for sod or grass. I don't know if he's going to be willing to do that, though. So
I'm just curious to know, and this might be way off topic, has turf ever been mentioned?
Artificial turf?
Artificial turf, if like a tax break for that? Is that in conjunction with this bill at all, or am I?
There's not, this bill doesn't offer that. The Spendla bill, HB 121, it does have some incentives, but I don't know that it's for like AstroTurf turf. It's for water-wise landscaping.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah.
There's been a great debate at the Capitol about when everyone says turf, the St. George guys are quick to say, do you mean AstroTurf or do you mean grass? So it's that when you raised that, Gary and I were going, that's the St. George joke.
Oh, really? Oh, wow, there you go.
Yeah,
Just
grass.
fake, but has the same aesthetic.
So there isn't anything currently that would incentivize people, and it's, Spendlove's bill is probably likely to be changed to only apply to state facilities anyway, from what we're hearing. And then there's a question of whether or not it would be funded. And so there really aren't any incentives for people to remove their landscaping and replace it with something that's more water-wise. Our own ordinance would allow artificial turf up to a point, as long as there were other materials that were living, so as well.
And that's not a part of Ray's bill.
No. Mm-mm. His is just strictly concerned with He doesn't feel it's appropriate for anybody to require a property owner to put in grass of any amount. So we're working through that. The other bill that's out there that's somewhat concerning, that a strong message was sent to leadership today, was there was a proposal to have a statewide land use authority similar to MIDA. If you're familiar with the Military Installation and Development Act, this was basically a state-run local government that was created at the time to be only used at Hill Air Force Base to allow them to develop that property. It took away local land use authority from the city in which Hill Air Force Base resides and gave it to this state organization. This proposal that is on the table but not yet drafted into bill now would create a statewide similar organization for housing that would allow developers whose housing developments meet certain requirements to bypass county ordinances. It's focused just on counties right now. Of course, that's the camel's nose under the tent, although actually I think the camel's coming in backwards, and cities would be next. But this would preempt greatly local land use decision making, but more importantly, planning. We have, as cities and counties, we've been adopting for years, trying to adopt, principles consistent with Wasatch 2050, and a point that was made to the governor's staff this morning from both county leadership and city leadership that I was a part of was, if you allow someone to go around the planning process, it has downstream impacts and undermines the whole intent of long-term planning. There's so many impacts of every development where you have to get water infrastructure and sewer infrastructure, and you have to make in streets, and it has to match everything that's there now and the development that's going to happen in the future. That if you just allow a single development to not have to comply or or any of those standards to be considered, it undoes the whole intent of planning. So we will see that. I think that's Representative Barry that is going to be sponsoring that. He got a shout out from the governor in the State of the Union address that people should support his effort. We didn't know what that was at the time. We do know now, but it was made pretty clear that this would be a hill to die on for counties and cities to give up that kind of land use authority to the state. IPA.
There are two bills that are public that are targeted at IPA at this point. SB 92, dealing with state procurement and what's known as a reciprocal preference. It's in committee tomorrow at 2 o'clock. There's been near constant meetings with the group of legislators that are moving the bills forward. Tomorrow there's some significant meetings with leadership and some other entities that are taking place. And then there's a second bill, HB 215 by Representative Carl Albrecht, that deals with subjecting IPA to the Public Service Commission for filing of various reports. IPA and municipal power systems are not subject to the Public Service Commission because that is something we do. That is a duty we hold as a city council to set rates, to review information related to our power sources. There are still some other bills that are in the works that are not yet public that we haven't been shown drafts of that are potentially out there involving water rights, taxes, potential removal of the project from being considered a political subdivision, which would affect the tax-exempt bonds. So there's still a number of things out there. It'll be a long session effort, so. There's one other one I wanted to raise before we hit 7 o'clock that's not IPA related. HB 182, local health department order amendments. Clint, I know you've had some communication with some of the other cities on this. It's quite frankly aimed at the frustration on Salt Lake City and Mayor Mendenhall enacting a mask mandate for Salt Lake City. But the bill broadly would prohibit a chief executive, the mayor, from exercising emergency powers in a a pandemic, an endemic, or a public health emergency. We have used this. We used it in the windstorm. And, you know, often any of those other emergencies come with things like, you know, a natural disaster might come with like a boil order or other things because our water supply is impacted. So this would be a bill I would suggest that we put on our watch list and are very concerned about.
Another item related to that bill that we're concerned about, that Clinton and I talked about, is that it may prevent us from being eligible for federal funds if we cannot declare an emergency. And that's, as we know from the windstorm. Galen, our reimbursement for the windstorm is totaling now about how much?
Probably about 1.1 million.
So imagine not being eligible to recover any of those costs by virtue of a law like this. It's concerning.
This is one I would suggest when it comes up for a public hearing. I think it's going to need a lot of pushback because the focus will be on COVID, unfortunately. And all these other very important powers need to be highlighted that they have swung this pendulum too far to aim at one entity that they're frustrated with. So this one would be one I would suggest that we plan on having the mayor or someone else who's available and flexible with the legislative schedule to testify on behalf of the city's concerns.
May I ask a follow-up question? Can we not declare a state of emergency without this law as a city?
That power is vested in the mayor solely,
But
or the governor.
You mean could we declare one today? Today,
if this was taken,
if this bill passes,
this bill passes. and
This
it's-
is the enabling statute that allows the mayor to do that. If that statute doesn't exist, mayor can't do that.
The mayor cannot,
No.
under any circumstance, declare a state of emergency.
Right, and I don't think there's any other statutory provision, for example, to allow the council to declare a state of emergency. It would just remove the only method we have for
Okay.
declaring that, I believe.
Yeah, they could, the wording is in response to an epidemic, a pandemic, or another public health emergency. I shared that experience that we had with the windstorm, and I said, I suppose you could say it wasn't an epidemic or a pandemic, but it certainly could have been or could be a public health emergency, especially if you start having issues with all those trees in the storm drains and clogging our storm drains, and that can become a public health emergency very quickly. So their response might be that, well, that's not a public health emergency. But who gets to decide that? What is and what is not a public health emergency?
Mayor, I know we're running a hair late. Can I take 2 more minutes?
Sure, we'll just take 2 more minutes on this, and then we'll get to our regular meeting. Thanks.
Just Kate highlighted something for the benefit that those who weren't at LPC is worth mentioning. There are many bills that are being drafted and considered in the name of COVID this session, or in the name of housing, where that is the problem, but they are creating other big policy issues much bigger than the particular problem. One example to me, and this is my personal opinion, but the law that was just passed yesterday that takes the authority away from a school board to close school for COVID and vests that power now. It has to be approved by the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, the Governor, and the state school board superintendent. It's being done in the name of COVID, but it really is taking authority away from the local elected officials, investing it in the state. And we're seeing that repeatedly, bill after bill, where they're using a specific issue to change the balance of power, particularly away from local elected officials. 1 week into the session, we've seen there are 80 bills. Will be over 300, we're sure, that deal with just local government. That's 80 bills just dealing with local government. And so I think it's something to keep our eye on. And it's not limited to us, but it's the same principle that's being applied to everywhere. So.
Thank you, Gary and Kate. And I appreciate Millie's suggestion to have a a document where you're keeping us up to speed with what the main pieces of legislation are that we all need to be aware of so that we can try to influence those things that are affecting us. So thank you so much. Do we need a little break, or can we move right into our? Okay, we will begin now our 7 o'clock City Council meeting. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for being here. And we will, I wanted to see, Brian, would you be willing to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you so much. Sorry to give no notice, but we'll ask Brian, who's here from our Community Service Council, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And then after that, we will have a prayer by Aaron Mcquivey.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dear Father in heaven, we are very grateful to be gathered together this evening. We are grateful for those who sacrifice on behalf of our city and our community to support and to guide the things that our community needs. We are grateful, especially in this legislative season, for the continued service and sacrifice, and we pray that we may all be mindful of the things that our community needs and have the foresight to recognize what those needs may look like in the future. We are grateful for their families, and we are grateful for this wonderful community that we have to live in, and for its beauty and its peace. And we say that in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Aaron, thank you so much for that prayer. Aaron is representing the North Canyon Stake tonight and is in my neighborhood. So really nice to see you, and feel free to stay. And of course, if you need to leave, we definitely understand. So thank you for being here tonight. We will now move to our public comment period. Public comment is 2 minutes per person, and if you would like to make a comment, please state your name. Is there anyone here that would like to make a public comment tonight? Okay, moving on, we will consider the approval of minutes from previous meetings.
I have a question. We had some discussion about whether we needed to change the minutes related to the appointments to commissions and who had made the clarifying statement. I don't know that I received an updated copy of the minutes or that we've clarified that, so that's my question.
Thank you, good question. I know Shauna said that those minutes were changed. Miranda, do you have an answer about that? Okay. All right. What would you like to do, council? Would you like to approve the minutes with, or would you like to wait on those pending the change?
I don't know that there's any harm in not approving tonight's minutes and that they could flow to the next meeting if we want to double check on it. I don't know that it's a
no problem.
significant item, but. So I make a motion that we move to the next item on the agenda.
Okay, all in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for the second. Thank you, Councilman Higginson. And all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. So we will revisit that in our next meeting. Council reports. Let's start with you, Councilman Higginson.
I'll race through our power resource updates that Alan gave us this morning. As you know, we're signed on to 2 different solar projects that are coming. The Red Mesa Solar Project, Alan informed us this morning, has been pushed from coming online in June of this year to November or December of this year. The Steel Solar Project looks to still be on track for December of this year. San Juan coal-fired plant in the Four Corners area where we get 5 megawatts of our power is still slated to close in June. They are also slated to reopen between July and October, depending on how much repair is needed in order to get it opened again. And they will run for 2 years on straight coal, well, on regular coal. And then the plan is that Enchant, which will be the name of the new project, will be a carbon capture project. And I think Alan has us signed up for 15 years of 10 megawatt power there. Is that right, Alan? So we're hoping that that Enchant project actually gets off the ground. There is some uncertainty, but it would help replace our Colorado River power, which, by the way, our Colorado River power, we got 50% of our normal allotment in December and January. We will get 60% of it in February and March, but of course it will probably never be what it was. And what it was is cheap and carbon-free, and we'll have to be looking for additional resources to replace it. I wanted to update you too as well on our change in our solar program. All of the applications that have come in, which are not many but some, since we made the change to allow net metering, have applied as net metering customers. We've had one feed-in tariff customer change over to net metering already, and one that is in the process of changing over right now, made possible by the council's change. So that's what I have. Sorry to drone on.
No, I definitely appreciate that report. Thank you so much. Anything for you tonight, Councilwoman Barr?
No, nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Price Hewish.
Okay, so just a brief report on what happened at Planning Commission last week. There was a very, very good presentation by our planning director, Francisco Astorga, and he and his staff gave a really good report on kind of what's happening in different cities around the state, specifically neighboring cities, and then looking a little further afield, and kind of to give us some guidance as to what's happening, what's working in other places, and so that was actually very informative because we looked at a number of places that, well, I will just actually recap it more concisely. The couple of areas of very big interest and discussion among the Planning Commission members was the deciding whether or not we would prefer business licensure versus conditional use permits.
For short-term rentals.
Yes, what am I saying?
No,
Oh, am I
just
saying
wanted
short-term
to-
rentals?
just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page.
Sorry, yes, short-term rentals, yes. And then the other main area of concern, I think, is whether or not we want those to be owner-occupied versus non-owner-occupied, and then kind of the definition of what that's going to be for a short-term rental. And I just would encourage everybody to look into this, look at some of the neighboring cities, because this is something that the planning department is going to be coming with a recommendation. And everyone on the commission is very engaged in this, and I think there was a lot of consensus from planning commission members about kind of a general direction moving forward, which is to find a way to make this work in our city in some way.
Excellent, thank you so much. I have a few committees to report about. The fire district is hiring 3 additional people. They have a 16-week academy where they tend to lose about 6. And so right now, they asked for approval for an additional 3, anticipating they'll lose about 6 through this process. And And it's cheaper to hire an additional 3 than paying overtime. And so that is a report from the fire district. And then at COG, which is the Council of Governments, it's really interesting. COG is made up by mayors, the chamber, county commissioners, and there was a presentation from Safe Harbor, as well as I'm excited I get to participate on the Davis Fund for Economic Development.
Cool.
And the Regional Growth Committee for Wasatch Front Regional Council. And then the last thing that I'll report is that at the South Davis Sewer District, this was really interesting to me. They have an odor control plan, and they have invested $250,000 addressing this. And they talked about an online forum where people can report complaints about odor. And they are even going as far as hiring an employee that will address odor complaints. And so if you know anyone that has a really good nose for, they're actually interested in hiring an employee that will go to the places where odors are noticed and to be a smeller in those areas. So I thought that was really interesting. Don't think that's the official title. So anyway, that is my report tonight. Councilman Bell.
I don't have anything to report tonight.
And Councilwoman Bradshaw.
Not to just continue to harp on legislative issues, but since it's the season we're in, there were a few other bills I thought I'd mention. HB 151 is the retail incentives bill. It's another significant issue that was raised in LPC and that we talked a little bit about at the planning retreat. That bill still has a lot of moving pieces. It was supposed to be heard on a committee agenda today. It was removed from the agenda because negotiations were still going on. So it falls in one of those kind of that category that Gary talked about in the work session about kind of broad brushes of local authority and control of planning and our tax incentives that we could use. So please be aware of that one. There may come a time or a call where we need municipal support from everyone to engage on that one. 2 water bills that I think are generally interesting and we ought to be very aware of and supportive because of their tie to the Great Salt Lake, and that we sit, just east of the Great Salt Lake, and the health of the lake ought to be something that we're thoughtful about, even though we don't necessarily touch it. We could definitely be impacted by winds and particles if the lake dries up. HB 33, which is the in-stream flow bill. This is a bill that would allow someone who has a water right to allow that water to continue down the stream and have that still be considered a beneficial use rather than applying that water to their field. It's taken a lot of work to get the agricultural community to support it. It was actually just about to be heard when I left the Capitol to come up here. It was going to be heard in a task force meeting. It'll be heard tomorrow at 2 p.m. as well. So something to be aware of, that it's taken a lot of years for the ag community in particular to see this as really a change in mindset. And the goal is that this bill will hopefully more water, particularly out of the Bear River, reach the Great Salt Lake. And then the other is one, as we embark on our general plan process, SB 110, water as part of a general plan, that the League of Cities and Towns has worked on closely, and I just want it on our radar as something that we be really thoughtful about as we embark on our own general plan process. The bill says that cities must start to integrate water planning into their general plan, which seems like, I think, a very smart idea. It gives a timeline because a lot of cities are going to be anywhere on the spectrum of, how old or new their plan is. So we'll get to be probably right on the forefront of doing some of these requirements in our general plan. So those are 3 additional bills that I thought were important to mention.
Thank you. We will move to the next item to consider approval of expenditures greater than $1,000.
I'll make a motion to approve the expenditures greater than $1,000 paid December 20th, 27th, and January 3rd.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We will now turn the time over to Gary Hill to consider the approval of appointment to Mr. Chris Simonson to the Bountiful Community Service Council.
Thank you. Appointments to the Service Council are made by the mayor with the advice and consent of City Council, and we have former council member Chris Simonson, who served on that committee as a liaison from the council and now would like to participate as an appointed member, and so the mayor and I make that recommendation.
Thank you. And I know that you're here tonight, Brian, as a representative from the Community Service Council, so thank you for being here. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
It's just been a joy to work with Chris, as you all know. And he'll be a great addition to our council and help further the volunteering efforts of the citizens here in Bountiful.
Thank you so much. Is there any discussion?
No, I'd be happy to make a motion that we, what do we do, ratify that appointment?
If it was John Mark, he'd say we compel.
Ratify or approve.
Approve the
The
appointment of former Councilman Simonson to the Community Service Council and ask Brian Potts to please put him to work.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, he is approved. Thank you so much. Okay, we will move to consider approval of the purchase of 2 transformers. Mr. Alan Johnson.
Yes, Mayor and Council, it's great to be here tonight, and as Mr. Higgins did talk, Councilman Higgins did say, and he was actually listening, did a really pretty good job of it. Like I
You
said,
thought I
these-
was
these
asleep,
both-
didn't you?
I did, I thought you was asleep, but we went through this at Power Commission, and these both do come with their recommendation. But the first one we have is the purchase of 2 transformers. We typically try and keep 4 of these in stock, and you'll notice that the delivery on these are 40 to 45 weeks, is getting to be a good part of a year at this point. These 2 transformers will be being changed out. They're actually, both of them, we found them at the hospital. And the first one will be changed this Saturday, and the other one will be changed in just a matter of a couple of weeks when we work the schedule to take an outage up there. Unfortunately, they just get that way. In our area, things rust and then they start leaking. So these will be changed out, and like I say, so I'll spit it out. So we want to buy these, put them in inventory, but we'll actually be replacing or using 2 out of our inventory in the next couple of weeks. So we did go out to bid. I will say transformers are become, as we talked about before, extremely tough to order, to get. In fact, the last one we have is we got some other was on order that the manufacturers are not even going to take orders for a year. They're so far behind that they're not even going to. So transformers at this point are 2 years out if you don't already have them signed for and on their way. So like I say, it would be the staff and the Power Commission recommendation that we approve the 2 transformers from Annexer Power Systems for a total of $32,900 to be put back into inventory.
Could I add something, Mayor? I'll add that this price, according to Jess from the Power Department, is about 20% higher than we would have paid last year for these. But just the fact that we can get these on order is a big deal. I also wanted to compliment the folks at the Power Department because they have heard rumors of truckloads or raincoats full of transformers that haven't been on inventories, different places, and have been able to pick those up to keep our inventory stocked. So keep up the sleight of hand, Alan.
Yeah,
We appreciate you keeping us in power. But it's just hard to get these right now. And what we can get are expensive.
you know, they call it COVID and just the supply chain. It's like some of the other things we're hearing. It's been really tough. In fact, we made the comment, World War I, you know, how they put the camouflage things over. We're going to come back and get a tarp that looks like blacktop with cracks in it. to hide our transformers under.
How often do you purchase these? Is this an annual thing or?
And transformers in this size, we typically come order it as we use them and then keep them inventory because there's such a long lead time on them. These transformers happen to be the 300 kVA, which is a pretty decent sized transformer, but it's a 277 480, very specialized, so they don't have them sitting around everywhere to go pick them up. So this size transformer, we may go a couple years and not order, and then may go through 2 or 3, and it depends on if a new business comes in or we have rust. We replace the smaller ones, which are like out in front of your houses. We replace about 120, 130 of them a year, just from cars that hit them or the salt that gets onto them in the park strip and gets them to rust. So we do go through quite a few transformers. Our current budget for transformers in this year's budget is $220,000. So it's a big issue, the replacing transformers. And as Councilman Higgins says, when you got a 45-week delivery time, if we don't have one in stock, it's really tough to tell somebody, well, we'll see you next year and get your power back on. So,
Any other questions for Ellen?
Mayor, if there aren't any more questions, I motion that we approve the purchase of 2 transformers from Annixter. Am I saying that correctly?
you did great.
Power Solutions in the amount of $32,900.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And we'll move to the next item, Mr. Alan Johnson.
I'm getting my fingers here. I was like, crap, did I lose it? I just had it. This next one we have is our Echo project that we've been spending some money on the last couple of years. If you remember, we got into it and had problems with the wheels that were cracked. And for those that weren't there, we had to go back and actually tear all 3 of them apart, replace the runners inside, and that's where the water comes in and gets it to spin around. While it was inside of it, they painted them, redid them, got them back up to speed. But what happened is once we got it back on, we started finding the thrust bearing. What the thrust bearing is the bearing when the pressure of the water pushes against it and turns, was running warm. I mean, it was within range, but it was just barely under the range. And so we ran it through the little bit that water we had last year, and then started going around trying to find out what would be the best way to fix this. And we assume what's happened is the geometries on the wheels that we had, reverse engineers, had been changed a little bit and just put a little bit more pressure on the bearings. Come to find out, that's a fairly common phenomena for the type of bearings that have been in this unit for 38 years. So we found a company in Colorado that will actually take the bearings. They would take the smaller thrust bearings, re-engineer them, or machine them, and put in larger bearings with a different material. And so we came back and we're doing that, and they're working on it. So they've got the bearings apart. They recognize that some of the seals and stuff that are 38 years old are cracking and whatever, and says we're going to have leaks. So they've come back and says we really ought to replace some of these Labra seals and different things. And that's what I've got here for, some additional money for the $28,821 for those additional seals, which would put the total project for $290,689. They're in process. They're supposed to be coming back and starting to put the units back together within the next 10 days to 2 weeks of what I'm hearing on the schedule. And then they'll have to come back. If we get water and we go to start up, they'll have to be there to make sure it's working as we start them back up. And should we have bearings, so if we get water, we can actually generate some powder out of them this summer. So it'll be the Staff and Power Commissions that we approve the additional $28,821 for the total of $290,689.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Please.
Sorry, Alan, this is topic adjacent. So the Echo project has been a little expensive of late.
Yes, it has.
And it's probably just that it's showing its age a little bit. How long do we anticipate being able to draw hydropower from the plant this year? I know that we shut down quite a bit earlier than projected last year.
It's a little early to tell. I mean, but looking at where we are water-wise, we're about 100%, but the reservoir is low. I do not anticipate running it through the summer. I think we're going to be down unless Mother Nature really changes the pattern. I think we're gonna be out of water in June this year.
So I will do my ski dance, because it will also double as a power dance to see if I can help. My next follow-up question is, has the staff or the Power Commission thought about, from a long-term planning perspective, our costs on Echo versus our projected ability to draw power from it? Because it seems like if it's going to be such a short-term resource, that we are spending a lot of money on it. Now, we may have already sunk lots and lots of money into it, so it's probably worth considering that. But as I've watched the repairs start to grow, I've started to wonder how much benefit we're getting.
No, it's, excuse me, that's a very good question. And what we need to be looking at is, what does it cost us for carbon-free green power, and also power that typically runs through the summer months? Now, unfortunately, if we stay in a drought for many more years, or this is the new weather pattern forever, this may be a question that we may not want to go any further with it. However, I think we will come out of this pattern to some degree and come back. Typically, this power from the hydros comes in at something in the neighborhood of about 4.5 cents average. That has not been the last 2 years. Now, we are still looking at both Echo and Pineview because of the age. There's the computers that are on there that need to be redone, the relays. I mean, they're hitting that point. I use the analogy of my car. My car, I either need to replace it or put some money into it to get another 100,000 out of it. They've hit this point where we're gonna have to put some money into them. One thing about hydros is they're very capital intensive when you first build them, and then you run for a lot of years, and we haven't had to put a real ton of money into it. That is not going to be the case. We're gonna have to put a fair amount of money in the next few years. But I do believe, and again, we can look deeper into it and kind of go back through this deeper for the Power Commission, City Council, what the viability of these hydros is going to come with the carbon-free power that they come from. I also believe that because the money we're spending on Echo, we're gonna be able to get it requalified to be green power and give us that thing and still supply power during the summer months. Unfortunately, right now, you see what you get. Like, say, the reservoirs are only about 25, 30% full. They will fill. It's just a matter, they typically run enough water to go through about twice. So it's got to have more snow to back it up when it gets started. So,
Thank you for indulging my topic adjacent questions. I've spent a lot bit of time on power issues lately, and so I had some questions.
It's an awesome question.
and I will tell you, we're only just a couple of years away from making a much bigger decision. Do we want to relicense it? We have a 50-year license, and it takes you 8 to 10 years to relicense it, and that will be another painful adventure. So like I say, we'll have to take a very serious look as we start that next venture as we got into it. So,
Thank you for indulging my questions.
Thank you. We appreciate that you are looking ahead and that we, as we have these questions, that you're always considering the future and the drought. Thank you so much. Any other questions for Mr. Johnson?
Can I make one comment, Mayor?
Please.
In relation to Kate's, the nice thing about those two small hydro plants is if we have an average water year, they're full and they're backed up. So it's not like Lake Powell or Lake Mead or any of the others where it's a multi-year filling process where you have to have multiple years above average. So, even if we just get back to average years, those resources will be there for the summer, as Alan was talking about. So it ought to factor into the equation that we don't have to wait multiple years for that to be accessible to us. It's just an average year.
I would concur. And there's value in the greenness of those resources. There's value in the proximity. There's value that we can control them. because there are entities, there's value that we don't have bonds sitting on them. There's a whole lot that ought to go into the balance sheet of those pros and cons. But it did strike me that we've spent quite a bit lately and not been able to get very much power from them.
Amen.
That is absolutely true. The other thing, I gotta be careful not get on my scheduling soapbox, but in our city, July and August, our power is so much higher, I'm talking load-wise, that they fit right into filling that need for just that couple, 3 months that we need during the summer months also. Typically. They did not last year. I do not expect it this year.
Thank goodness we have that IPA resource we can call back for the summer.
Oh, help me.
Alan, when do you anticipate the construction or rebuilding being completed on Echo?
This project right here, I would suspect by the end of February it will be finished, and then we'll have to bring them back in when we get water, which will happen, I will say, the middle of April to the first part of May, when we'll start letting water out, and they'll have to make sure everything's working right. So the work will be done by the end of February, but we won't be starting or running any water through them until April, May timeframe.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm ready for a motion if you are.
I'm happy to make a motion that we recommend approval of the additional work quote from Integrated Power Services in the amount of $28,821.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate it.
And now we'll consider a motion to adjourn to a closed session.
Mayor, I'd like to make the motion to adjourn to a closed session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, reasonably imminent litigation, and/or to discuss the character and/or competency of an individual as outlined in Utah State Code. I'd like us to adjourn to the planning room.
I'll second that beautiful motion.
All in favor?
This is a roll call.
Oh, thank you. Thank you
And I
so
just
much.
noticed this thing has a track that will just, if I just do this, it lines them up beautifully for me. So, look at that. They're all lined up with Councilmember Price Hewish first.
Yay.
Councilmember Higginson.
Aye.
Councilmember Bell.
Aye.
Councilmember Barr.
Aye.
Councilmember Bradshaw.
Aye.
Okay.